Confidence rarely begins as a trait. It is not something people simply possess or lack. It is something built through repeated exposure to outcomes that feel controllable. Those outcomes are rarely random. They are shaped, constrained, and often deliberately narrowed. What looks like natural confidence is often the result of carefully structured environments. Small wins play a central role in this process. They are predictable, repeatable, and emotionally reinforcing. Each one confirms a sense of capability without introducing meaningful uncertainty. Over time, these wins begin to condition behavior. They create an expectation that effort leads to reward in a stable and understandable way. That expectation becomes internalized as confidence. But the stability of these outcomes is not incidental. It is engineered through limits placed on risk, scope, and variability. The environment is designed to produce success within defined boundaries. Within those boundaries, performance improves. Feedback loops remain tight, and results stay consistent. The individual becomes more certain, not because uncertainty has been mastered, but because it has been removed. This is where confidence takes on a particular shape. It reflects familiarity with controlled conditions rather than exposure to open-ended outcomes. It feels strong, but it is context-dependent. As long as the environment remains stable, the confidence holds. The individual continues to operate within systems that produce similar results. The pattern reinforces itself without interruption. The problem is not the presence of confidence. The problem is how it was constructed. Confidence built on controlled wins carries the assumptions of those controls. Those assumptions are rarely visible. They sit beneath the surface, shaping decisions without being examined. The individual believes they understand cause and effect, but only within a narrow range. When conditions shift, those assumptions begin to break. Outcomes become less predictable, and feedback becomes less immediate. The same behaviors no longer produce the same results. At that point, confidence is tested in a different way. It is no longer supported by structure. It is exposed to variability that cannot be managed through repetition alone. Most people interpret this as a loss of confidence. In reality, it is the removal of conditions that made confidence feel stable. What disappears is not ability, but the predictability that sustained it. Controlled wins create a specific relationship with risk. They teach that risk can be managed through incremental progress. They suggest that uncertainty can be reduced to something manageable. But this relationship is incomplete. It does not account for environments where outcomes are not linear. It does not prepare individuals for situations where feedback is delayed or uneven. In those environments, the same strategies begin to fail. The behaviors that once produced steady gains no longer function in the same way. Confidence, built on those behaviors, starts to weaken. This is not because the individual lacks capacity. It is because their experience has been shaped by conditions that limit exposure to real uncertainty. They have been trained within a narrow band of outcomes. That training is often rewarded. Systems tend to favor predictable performance. They provide steady reinforcement for behaviors that operate well within defined constraints. As a result, individuals are encouraged to stay within those constraints. The consistency of controlled wins becomes more valuable than the possibility of less predictable outcomes. Stability takes priority over expansion. Over time, this creates a ceiling, not an obvious one, but a functional limit on what is attempted. The individual continues to operate where success feels likely, avoiding environments where outcomes cannot be controlled. Confidence in this context becomes self-reinforcing. It grows through repetition, but only within the same boundaries. It does not expand beyond them. This is where the hidden cost emerges. The same process that builds confidence also restricts exposure to real upside. By staying within controlled environments, the range of possible outcomes remains limited. The individual becomes highly effective within a narrow domain. They refine their approach, improve their performance, and strengthen their sense of certainty. But the domain itself does not change. Opportunities that exist outside that domain require a different kind of engagement. They involve uncertainty that cannot be reduced through incremental gains. They require decisions without clear feedback. For someone conditioned by controlled wins, these environments feel unstable, not because they are inherently unmanageable, but because they fall outside familiar patterns. The absence of predictable reinforcement creates hesitation. That hesitation is often interpreted as risk aversion. In reality, it is a response to the removal of structure. The individual is no longer operating within a system that guarantees small, consistent gains. At this point, behavior begins to contract. Choices are made to preserve existing confidence rather than challenge it. The focus shifts from expansion to maintenance. This shift is subtle. It does not feel like avoidance. It feels like prudence, discipline, or consistency. But it reinforces the same boundaries that produced the initial confidence. Over time, this creates a stable but constrained trajectory. Progress continues, but within a fixed range. The individual becomes more certain, but not necessarily more exposed to meaningful change. The underlying mechanism remains the same. Confidence is sustained by environments that produce controlled outcomes. Those environments limit variability, and in doing so, limit potential. The result is a form of confidence that feels strong but operates within defined limits. It performs well under familiar conditions but does not extend easily into uncertain ones. This is not a flaw in the individual. It is a consequence of how behavior has been conditioned. Repeated exposure to controlled wins creates a specific expectation about how outcomes should behave. When reality does not match that expectation, confidence appears to weaken. But what is actually being revealed is the dependency on structured reinforcement. Understanding this changes how confidence is interpreted. It shifts the focus from internal traits to external conditions. It reframes confidence as a product of environment rather than a fixed quality. Once seen this way, the pattern becomes clearer. Small, predictable gains are not neutral. They shape behavior in ways that feel empowering while quietly restricting exposure to broader outcomes. Confidence, then, is not simply built. It is manufactured through repetition under controlled conditions. And those conditions determine not just how confident someone feels, but where that confidence can operate. Want to see the hidden rules shaping money, power, and human behavior? Subscribe to Unseen Forces.